Remember the sound of a perfectly tuned twin-cylinder screaming down an empty highway at dawn? The smell of oil and leather mixing with morning air as you pushed your bike to its absolute limit? The 1960s weren't just about flower power and moon landings. This was the decade when motorcycles transformed from basic transportation into genuine speed machines. When engineers started asking dangerous questions like, what if we add another cylinder? And how fast is too fast? Today we're counting down 25 of the fastest motorcycles from the 1960s that absolutely deserve a modern comeback. And trust me, some of these machines were so ahead of their time, they'd still turn heads at any bike meet today. So grab your helmet and let's take a ride through history. Number 25, the Suzuki GT380. Let's start with a bike that most people have completely forgotten about, the Suzuki GT380. This thing rolled out in the very late 60s, right at the tail end of the decade, and it was Suzuki's early attempt at building a serious multi-cylinder performance machine. Now, it wasn't the fastest bike on the block, not even close. But what it lacked in outright speed, it made up for in innovation. This was one of the first Japanese bikes to really experiment with multiple cylinders in a way that made sense for everyday riders. The GT380 had a 3-cylinder 2-stroke engine that produced around 40 horsepower. Doesn't sound like much today, right? But in 1969, that was enough to push this thing to about 100 miles per hour. The really interesting part was how smooth it was. Most 2-strokes from this era vibrated like paint mixers. They'd shake your fillings loose on a long ride. But the GT380 was different. That triple-cylinder configuration balanced out the vibrations in a way that made it actually comfortable to ride at speed. Suzuki was learning. They were figuring out that speed wasn't just about raw power, it was about refinement, about making a bike that could go fast without beating the rider to death in the process. The styling was pure late 60s Japanese. Clean lines, chrome everywhere, and that distinctive Suzuki tank badge that looked like it belonged on a spaceship. The bike had drum brakes, which seems terrifying now, but they were actually pretty decent for the era. The GT380 deserves a comeback because it represents a turning point. This was when Japanese manufacturers stopped copying British designs and started innovating. A modern version with fuel injection, disc brakes, and modern suspension, that would be something special. Imagine that triple-cylinder smoothness with modern reliability. Pure magic. Number 24, the AJS Model 20. The AJS Model 20 was Britain's answer to the speed wars of the 1960s, and what an answer it was. This thing was a proper British sport twin that could hold its own against anything coming out of Japan or Italy at the time. AJS had been building motorcycles since 1909, so by the 60s they knew what they were doing. The Model 20 had a 500cc parallel twin engine that pumped out about 33 horsepower. Again, not earth-shattering by today's standards, but in 1965, that was serious power. What made the Model 20 special was its racing pedigree. This wasn't just a street bike, it was basically a race bike with lights. AJS had been dominating the Isle of Man TT races for years, and all that racing knowledge went straight into the Model 20. The frame was incredibly advanced for its time. Lightweight but strong, the suspension was tuned for high-speed stability, and the engine? That thing was bulletproof. You could ride it flat out all day and it would just keep going. The top speed was around 95 miles per hour, which doesn't sound impressive until you remember that most cars from 1965 couldn't even hit 80. The Model 20 had that classic British look, long, low, and purposeful. Chrome fenders, a teardrop tank, and those distinctive AJS badges that told everyone you were riding something special. The sound was incredible too. That British twin rumble that no amount of Japanese engineering could replicate. Why does it deserve a comeback? Because AJS represents a lost era of British motorcycling. Before the industry collapsed in the 70s, British bikes were the gold standard. A modern Model 20 with electronic fuel injection and modern brakes, but keeping that classic British character, that would sell like crazy. People are hungry for authenticity, for bikes with real heritage. The Model 20 has that in spades. Number 23, the Honda Dream CB250. Now, here's a bike that changed everything. The Honda Dream CB250 from 1968. This little 249cc twin was Honda's way of showing the world that small displacement didn't mean slow. Honda claimed this thing could hit 160 kilometers per hour. That's about 99 miles per hour. From a 250 in 1968. That was absolutely insane. Most British 500cc bikes couldn't go that fast. The Dream CB250 had an overhead cam twin-cylinder engine that revved like nothing else on the market. While British bikes were chugging along at 5,000 RPM, the Honda was screaming up to 9,000. It was a completely different philosophy. Instead of making power through displacement, Honda made it through revs. The engineering was incredible. The engine had horizontally split crankcases, which was revolutionary for a small bike. The transmission was a 5-speed, when most bikes still had 4. The electrical system actually worked, which was a miracle compared to British bikes of the era. You could ride this thing in the rain and the lights wouldn't die. Revolutionary. The styling was pure 60s. Honda, that distinctive tank shape with the rubber knee pads, the high narrow handlebars, the chrome fenders that went on forever. It looked fast even standing still. But the real magic happened when you rode it. The Dream CB250 taught a whole generation of riders that you didn't need a massive engine to have fun. It was light, nimble, and quick. You could flick it through corners like a bicycle. And that engine note at 9,000 RPM, pure music. This bike deserves a comeback because it represents Honda at its innovative best. A modern 250 with that same high-revving character, but with fuel injection and modern chassis technology, that would be the perfect city bike. Light, fast, efficient, and fun. Everything a modern motorcycle should be. Plus, with today's environmental concerns, a high-performance small displacement bike makes more sense than ever. Number 22, the Kawasaki W1. The Kawasaki W1 was Japan's first serious attempt at building a big British-style motorcycle, and they almost pulled it off. Almost. This bike came out in 1966, and it was Kawasaki's flagship model. A 650cc parallel twin that was basically a copy of the BSA A10. But here's the thing, sometimes copies are better than originals. The W1 had all the character of a British twin, but with Japanese build quality. The engine produced about 50 horsepower, which was competitive with anything coming out of Britain at the time, but it was smoother, more refined, and way more reliable. You didn't need to carry a toolkit just to make it home. The top speed was around 115 miles per hour, which was properly fast for 1966, but speed wasn't really the point of the W1. This was about prestige, about showing that Japan could build big, powerful motorcycles, not just small commuter bikes. The styling was interesting. It looked British from a distance, but up close you could see the Japanese touches. The tank was a bit sleeker. The chrome was a bit brighter. The switches actually worked. It was like someone had taken a British bike and fixed all the annoying bits. The W1 wasn't a huge sales success. It was expensive, and most people who wanted a British-style bike just bought a British bike. But it was important. This was the bike that taught Kawasaki how to build big motorcycles. Everything they learned from the W1 went into their later bikes. The legendary Z1, that started here. Why bring it back? Because the W1 represents a fascinating moment in motorcycle history, when Japan was transitioning from copier to innovator. A modern W1 with that classic styling but modern performance, that would be something special. Kawasaki's W800 is close, but imagine something with more power, more technology, but keeping that vintage soul. The market is crying out for bikes like that. Number 21, the Yamaha XS650. The Yamaha XS650 technically didn't arrive until 1970, but its development started in the late 60s, so we're counting it. This bike was Yamaha's answer to the British twins, but they did it their way. Instead of copying, they innovated. The XS650 had a 654cc parallel twin, but it was nothing like the British engines. This thing had overhead cams, horizontally split cases, and an electric starter. In 1969, when they were developing it, an electric starter on a big bike was space-age technology. The engine produced 53 horsepower and could push the bike to about 110 miles per hour. But the real innovation was in the details. The XS650 had a disc brake up front when most bikes still had drums. It had a 5-speed transmission. The engine was rubber mounted to reduce vibration. Yamaha was thinking about rider comfort in a way that nobody else was. The development of this bike in the late 60s was shrouded in secrecy. Yamaha knew they had something special. They spent years perfecting it, testing it, refining it. When it finally launched, it changed everything. This was a British-style bike that was better than British bikes in every measurable way. The styling was conservative but elegant. It didn't scream for attention like some Japanese bikes. It was understated, classy, the kind of bike you could ride to work during the week and tour the countryside on weekends. It did everything well. The XS650 deserves a revival because it represents the moment Japan truly surpassed Britain in motorcycle manufacturing, A modern version with that same Duke series, everything character, but with modern fuel injection and ABS, that would be the perfect modern classic. Yamaha actually did bring it back briefly with the XSR 700, but imagine a proper 650 twin with all the character of the original. The market needs more bikes like that. Bikes with soul, with character, with that mechanical connection that modern bikes sometimes lack. Number 20, the Matchless G50. The Matchless G50 was Britain's secret weapon in the 1960s speed wars. This wasn't a mass production bike, this was a race-bred monster that just happened to be street legal. Well, barely street legal. The G50 had a 496cc single-cylinder engine. A single. When everyone else was going to twins and triples, Matchless stuck with one massive piston. And it worked. This thing could hit 110 miles per hour, which was incredible for a single-cylinder bike. The engine was basically a racing engine with lights. It had been developed for road racing, and Matchless decided to sell a few to the public. The compression ratio was insane for the era. The cam timing was aggressive. This wasn't a bike for beginners. You had to know what you were doing to ride a G50. The frame was a work of art, hand-welded Reynolds tubing, the same stuff they used in racing bicycles. It was light, strong, and incredibly expensive to produce. The suspension was state-of-the-art road holder forks up front and Girling shocks in the rear. This was as good as it got in the 60s, but the real magic was in how it rode. The G50 had a power delivery unlike anything else. That big single would thump along at low speeds, then suddenly explode into life when you opened the throttle. It was addictive. The sound was incredible too. A deep, thunderous boom that you could feel in your chest. Production numbers were tiny. Matchless only built about 180 of these between 1958 and 1963, with most of the development and refinement happening in the early 60s. Each one was basically hand-built. Finding one today is like finding a unicorn. A modern G50 would be incredible. Imagine that same single-cylinder character, but with modern fuel injection to smooth out the rough spots, modern suspension to handle that power, modern brakes to stop it, keep the minimalist styling, keep the raw mechanical feel, but add just enough modern technology to make it rideable. That's a bike people would queue up to buy. Number 19. The Bultaco Metralla Mk2. Spanish motorcycles from the 60s. Most people don't even know they existed, but Bultaco was building some of the most innovative bikes of the decade. The Metralla Mk2 was their masterpiece. This little two-stroke screamer could embarrass bikes with twice the displacement. The Metralla had a 244cc two-stroke single that produced about 25 horsepower. Doesn't sound like much, but this bike only weighed 260 pounds. The power-to-weight ratio was incredible. It could hit 90 miles per hour, which was amazing for such a small engine, but speed wasn't really the point. The Metralla was about handling. Bultaco had been building trials and motocross bikes for years, and all that off-road knowledge went into the Metralla. The frame geometry was perfect. The weight distribution was ideal. This thing could carve corners like nothing else on the road. The styling was unique. It didn't look British or Japanese. It looked Spanish. The fuel tank was slim and elegant. The seat was low and purposeful. Everything was functional. No chrome for chrome's sake, just pure, purposeful design. The exhaust note was incredible. That two-stroke scream that could wake the dead. It sounded like a racing bike because essentially it was. Bultaco built these things to win races, then added lights, and called it a street bike. The Metralla deserves a comeback because it represents a different philosophy. Not everything has to be about raw power. Sometimes it's about the total package. A modern Metralla with a small, high-tech engine, incredible handling, and that minimalist Spanish style. That would be something special in today's world of overweight, overcomplicated motorcycles. Imagine a modern two-stroke with direct injection for clean emissions, but keeping that incredible power delivery. Or maybe a small displacement four-stroke single that revs to the moon. Either way, the spirit of the Metralla needs to return. Number 18, the Moto Guzzi. 350B Italian motorcycles from the 60s were special. They had style, passion, and engineering that was sometimes brilliant, sometimes insane, often both. The Moto Guzzi 350B was all of that and more. This bike was Moto Guzzi's attempt at building a proper sport bike, and they succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. The 350B had a 349cc horizontal single-cylinder engine. Horizontal. The cylinder stuck out the side like the bike was giving you a mechanical middle finger. It looked weird, but it was brilliant. The low center of gravity made the bike incredibly stable. The cooling was excellent because the cylinder was right out in the airstream. 40 horsepower from that little single was enough to push the 350B to about 100 miles per hour, but the way it delivered that power was unique. The horizontal engine had a completely different torquey curve than vertical engines. It pulled from low down and just kept pulling. The flywheel effect of that horizontal cylinder made the power delivery incredibly smooth. The handling was telepathic. That low center of gravity meant you could lean this thing over until the foot peg scraped and it would just grip and go. Italian writers called it La Piccola Rossa, the little red one, because most of them were painted in Guzzi's signature racing red. The engineering details were fascinating. The engine had exposed valve gear that you could watch working. The shaft drive was smooth and maintenance-free. The brakes were massive for such a small bike. This was Italian engineering at its finest. Quirky, but brilliant. A modern 350B would be incredible. Keep that horizontal engine layout because it's so unique. Add fuel injection, modern materials to reduce weight even further, and modern suspension technology. The market is full of boring, identical motorcycles. Something as distinctive as a modern Guzzi 350B would stand out immediately. Moto Guzzi still makes horizontal twins, but a modern single, that would be something special. Number 17. The Yamaha YDS3. The Yamaha YDS3 was Japan's first real sport bike. Forget everything else. This was the bike that started it all. When it came out in 1964, it completely redefined what a small motorcycle could be. The world would never be the same. The YDS3 had a 246cc two-stroke twin that produced 24 horsepower. By 1964 standards, that was incredible. This thing could hit 85 miles per hour, which was faster than most British 350 singles. It weighed nothing, handled like a dream, and looked like it came from the future. The technology was revolutionary. The engine had rotary disc valve induction, which was racing technology. The transmission was a 5-speed when most bikes had 4. The frame was a twin cradle design that was incredibly rigid for its weight. Yamaha was throwing everything they had at this bike. But what really made the YDS3 special was its accessibility. This wasn't some expensive, temperamental European exotic. This was a bike that normal people could afford and maintain. It started every time, ran smoothly, and didn't leak oil all over your garage. Revolutionary concepts for 1964. The styling was pure 60s cool. That teardrop tank with the Yamaha tuning fork logo, the high pipes that swept back along the sides, the tiny fly screen that did absolutely nothing but looked amazing. This bike looked fast standing still, and it delivered on that promise. Racing success followed immediately. Privateers started winning races on YDS3s. Yamaha's factory team used it as the basis for their racing bikes. This little two-stroke twin was beating bikes with twice the displacement. It was embarrassing for the established manufacturers. A modern YDS3 would tap into the growing market for small, fun sport bikes. Imagine a modern 250 twin with that same lightweight philosophy. Modern two-stroke technology could make it clean and efficient while keeping that incredible power delivery. Or a high-revving 4-stroke twin that captures the same spirit. Either way, the motorcycle world needs more bikes like the YDS3. Small, light, fast, and fun. Number 16. The Honda CB450 K0. The Honda CB450 K0 was the bike that proved Honda was serious about performance. This wasn't just another reliable commuter. This was a genuine sport bike that could run with anything from Europe. And it did it with technology that was years ahead of its time. The CB450 had a 444cc parallel twin with double overhead cams, DOHC, in 1965. When most manufacturers were still using push rods, the engine revved to 9,500 RPM and produced 43 horsepower. It could hit 104 miles per hour, which was supercar territory in 1965. But the real innovation was the torsion bar valve springs. Instead of traditional coil springs, Honda used torsion bars. This allowed the engine to rev higher without valve float. It was Formula 1 technology in a street bike. Nobody else was doing anything like this. The CB450 looked like nothing else on the road. That distinctive tank with the rubber knee pads, the high, swept-back pipes, the massive drum brake up front that was almost as big as the wheel. It looked technical, purposeful, serious. This wasn't a toy. The engineering throughout was incredible. The frame was incredibly rigid for its weight. The suspension was adjustable, which was rare for street bikes. The electrical system was 12 volt when most bikes were still 6. Honda was thinking ahead, incorporating Technology that wouldn't become standard for years. The CB450 deserves a comeback because it represents Honda at its innovative best. This was when they were hungry, when they were trying new things, when they weren't afraid to be different. A modern CB450 with that same innovative spirit. Imagine a middleweight twin with cutting-edge technology. Variable valve timing, cylinder deactivation, exotic materials. The kind of bike that makes other manufacturers ask, how did they do that? That's what the CB450 was in 1965. Number 15. The Triumph Trident 750. The Triumph Trident 750 was Britain's last stand against the Japanese invasion. This three-cylinder monster was supposed to save the British motorcycle industry. It didn't, but not for lack of trying. This was an incredible motorcycle that was just a few years too late. Development started in the late 60s when BSA and Triumph realized they needed something special to compete with the Honda CB750. The Trident had a 740cc triple that produced 58 horsepower. It could hit 120 miles per hour, which was properly fast for 1969. The engine was smooth, powerful, and relatively reliable by British standards. The sound was incredible. That triple-cylinder howl was completely different from twins or fours. It had a unique character that nothing else could match. Triumph Racing triples were dominating at Daytona, and that racing development went straight into the street bike. The handling was excellent too. The frame was designed by Rob North, who knew a thing or two about making motorcycles go around corners. The Trident could carve up a twisty road as well as it could blast down a straight. This was a proper all-rounder, but timing killed it. By the time the Trident arrived in late 1968, early 1969, the Honda CB750 was already established. The Honda was more refined, more reliable, and had that impressive four-cylinder engine. The Trident was excellent, but it wasn't excellent enough to overcome Honda's head start. The styling was controversial. Some loved it, some hated it. That angular tank, the breadbox side covers, the unusual seat shape. It didn't look like traditional British bikes. It was trying to be modern, but ended up looking awkward. Still, it had presence. You knew it was something special. A modern Trident would be incredible. Triumph already makes excellent triples, but imagine something that specifically channels the original Trident. Raw, powerful, slightly rough around the edges, not trying to be perfect, just trying to be exciting. That's what modern motorcycling needs more of. Number 14. The Norton Atlas 750. The Norton Atlas 750 was the last of the traditional big British twins, and what a way to go out. This bike was everything that was great about British motorcycles, and everything that was wrong with them, all rolled into one magnificent, frustrating package. The Atlas had a 745cc parallel twin that produced 49 horsepower. It could hit 115 miles per hour on a good day with a tailwind if everything was working properly, which, being a Norton, it often wasn't. But when it was running right, this thing was magic. The engine had massive torque. You could leave it in top gear all day and it would just pull from any speed. The power delivery was like a steam engine. Smooth, relentless, unstoppable. This wasn't about peak horsepower or maximum revs. This was about that feeling of unlimited pulling power. The frame was the famous Norton Featherbed, widely considered the best handling chassis of its era. The Atlas could corner like nothing else from the 60s. It was stable at speed, flickable in the turns, and predictable everywhere. Riders said it handled like it was on rails. But the vibration. Oh, the vibration. At certain RPMs, the Atlas would shake so badly that your vision would blur. Bolts would loosen. Parts would fall off. Your hands would go numb. Norton tried rubber mounting everything, but it only helped so much. This was the price you paid for that big twin character. The styling was pure British classic. Long, low, purposeful. Chrome mudguards. That beautiful Norton tank badge. The distinctive Norton silencers. It looked like a proper motorcycle, not an appliance. It had presence, character, soul. Why bring it back? Because the Atlas represents the pinnacle of traditional British twin engineering. A modern version with proper engine balancing to eliminate the vibration but keep the character, modern fuel injection to improve starting and running, that would be something special. Norton has tried several times to recapture this magic. Maybe it's time they tried again. Number 13. The Triumph Tiger 650 TR6. The Triumph Tiger 650, also known as the TR6, was the bike that Steve McQueen made famous in The Great Escape. but even without Hollywood, this was a legendary machine. The Tiger was Triumph's do-everything bike, fast enough for the highway, tough enough for dirt roads, cool enough for Saturday night. The TR6 had a 649cc parallel twin that produced 42 horsepower. Top speed was around 105 miles per hour, which was respectable for a bike that could also handle dirt roads. This was before the age of specialization. Bikes had to do everything, and the Tiger did everything well. The engine was understressed and incredibly reliable by British standards. You could thrash it all day and it would ask for more. The low-end torque was excellent for dirt riding. The top-end power was enough for highway cruising. It was the Swiss Army knife of motorcycles. The handling was excellent both on and off-road. The frame was strong enough for jumping, which McQueen proved repeatedly. The suspension had enough travel for rough roads, but was controlled enough for spirited street riding. The 19-inch wheels were a perfect compromise between street and dirt. The styling evolved throughout the 60s, but it always looked purposeful. High pipes for ground clearance, a bash plate to protect the engine, wide handlebars for control. It looked like it could go anywhere, do anything. And it could. The TR6 influenced an entire generation of riders. This was the bike that proved you didn't need different motorcycles for different purposes. One bike could do it all. The modern adventure bike segment owes everything to the Tiger 650. A modern Tiger 650 would be brilliant. Triumph makes excellent adventure bikes now, but imagine something simpler, lighter, more basic. A bike that captures that original do-anything spirit without all the electronic complexity of modern adventure bikes. Sometimes less is more, and the original Tiger proved that. Number 12. The Harley-Davidson Sprint 350 weight. Harley made a small, lightweight sport bike in the 60s. They sure did, and it was actually pretty good. The Sprint 350 was Harley's Italian connection, built by Aermacchi in Italy and sold through Harley dealers. It was everything a Harley wasn't supposed to be, which made it fascinating. The Sprint had a 344cc horizontal single, just like the Moto Guzzi. It produced 25 horsepower and could hit 90 miles per hour. Not earth-shattering performance, but respectable for a 350 single. What made it special was how un-Harley it was. This thing was light, nimble, and actually went around corners. The engine was smooth and refined by 60s standards. It didn't shake your fillings loose like a big twin. It started easily, even on cold mornings. The 4-speed transmission actually found neutral when you wanted it to. Revolutionary concepts for Harley-Davidson. The handling was excellent. That horizontal engine kept the center of gravity low. The Italian frame and suspension knew how to deal with corners. This wasn't a straight-line cruiser. This was a proper sport bike that happened to have a Harley badge. The styling was pure Italian with a few Harley touches. The tank shape was elegant and sporty. The engine cases were beautifully cast. But it had Harley badges and that distinctive Harley-Davidson script on the tank. It was a contradiction that somehow worked. The Sprint was a sales disaster in America. Harley riders didn't want a small Italian bike. Italian bike riders didn't want a Harley. It fell between two stools and satisfied nobody. But that's exactly why it deserves a comeback. Imagine Harley-Davidson building a proper small sport bike today. Something completely different from their usual lineup. Light, fast, nimble, and technically advanced. It would shock the motorcycle world just like the original Sprint did. Sometimes manufacturers need to surprise people to show they can do something different. The Sprint 350 proved Harley could think outside the box. Maybe it's time they tried again. Number 11. The Suzuki T500 Cobra. The Suzuki T500 Cobra was Japan's first serious attempt at building a big, powerful motorcycle, and they went about it in the most Japanese way possible. While everyone else was building 4-stroke, Suzuki doubled down on 2-stroke technology. The result was one of the most exciting and terrifying motorcycles of the 60s. The T500 had a 492cc 2-stroke twin that produced 47 horsepower. Doesn't sound like much, but this thing only weighed 390 pounds. The power-to-weight ratio was incredible. It could hit 115 miles per hour, which was proper superbike territory in 1968, but it was the power delivery that made the T500 legendary, or infamous. 2 strokes are peaky at the best of times, but the T500 took it to extremes. Nothing. Then suddenly, all the power right now. It was like someone hit you in the back with a baseball bat. Raiders called it the Titan in some markets, but everyone knew it as the bike that would try to kill you. The front wheel would come up in the first 3 gears if you weren't careful, or even if you were careful. The handling was interesting, to put it politely. The frame was a bit flexible for the power, the suspension was overwhelmed, the brakes were marginal. This was a bike that required total concentration all the time. You couldn't relax for a second. But when you got it right, when you were in the zone, the T500 was incredible. The acceleration was mind-bending. The sound was that classic two-stroke scream that could wake the dead. It was raw, visceral, exciting. Everything a motorcycle should be. The styling was aggressive for Suzuki. Twin pipes sweeping up high, a muscular tank, a racy seat. It looked fast and dangerous, which was truth in advertising. This was not a beginner's bike. Why bring it back? Because motorcycling has become too safe, too predictable. A modern T500 with just enough electronic assistance to keep you alive but still maintaining that raw character, that would be something special. Imagine modern two-stroke technology with direct injection, traction control that you could turn off, and that same crazy power delivery. It would sell to everyone who thinks modern bikes are too boring. Number 10. The Aermacchi 350 Sprint. Here we go. Top 10 territory. The Aermacchi 350 Sprint was the Italian bike that nobody expected. While everyone was focused on the big names like Ducati and Moto Guzzi, Aermacchi was quietly building one of the best small sport bikes of the decade. This little horizontal single could embarrass bikes with twice the displacement. The 350 Sprint had that distinctive horizontal single hanging out the side, producing 25 horsepower. But this wasn't just about power. This was about the total package. The bike weighed almost nothing. The handling was telepathic, the brakes actually worked. It was a revelation in 1969. The engine was a work of art. Aluminum alloy construction when most singles were iron. Wet sump lubrication that actually kept the engine happy. A 4-speed transmission that shifted like butter. This was Italian engineering at its finest. Beautiful, functional, and just a little bit exotic. Top speed was around 95 miles per hour, which was impressive for a 350 single. But speed wasn't the point. This bike was about the experience. The way it flicked through corners, the mechanical symphony of that exposed valve gear, the perfect riding position that made you feel like Giacomo Agostini. The racing pedigree was serious. Aermacchi Sprints were winning races all over Europe. The factory team was competitive in Grand Prix racing. This wasn't just a street bike that looked racy. This was a race bike that happened to be street legal. The minimal bodywork, the clip-on handlebars, the rear set foot pegs. Everything about it screamed competition. What killed it was distribution. Outside of Italy, these were hard to find. Harley-Davidson sold some in America as the Sprint H, but they didn't know how to market an Italian sport bike. Most Americans never even knew these existed. Criminal, really, because this was one of the best bikes of the 60s. A modern Aermacchi Sprint would be perfect for today's market. Small displacement sport bikes are hot right now. Imagine that horizontal single with modern fuel injection, a 6-speed transmission, and modern suspension. Keep it light, keep it simple, keep it beautiful. The world needs more bikes that are about the total experience, not just spec sheet numbers. Number 9. The Kawasaki H1 Mach III. The Kawasaki H1 Mach III. Just saying the name makes old-timers nervous. This was the bike that earned Kawasaki its reputation for building absolutely mental motorcycles. When it arrived in 1969, it rewrote the rules about what a street bike could be and how dangerous it could be. The H1 had a 498cc two-stroke triple that produced 60 horsepower. That was serious power for 1969. But it was how it delivered that power that made the H1 legendary. The power band was like a light switch. Below 6,000 RPM, it was docile, almost boring. Above 6,000, hold on for dear life. This thing could run the quarter mile in under 13 seconds. In 1969. That was faster than most muscle cars. The top speed was officially 120 miles per hour, but riders reported seeing 130 on the Speedo, if they were brave enough to hold on that long. The front wheel had a tendency to get very light at speed, or leave the ground entirely. The handling was terrifying. The frame was too flexible for the power. The suspension was overwhelmed. The brakes were a suggestion more than a command. The bike would weave at high speed, it would tank slap if you looked at it wrong, the front wheel would come up in the first 3 gears without warning. This was not a motorcycle, this was a barely controlled explosion. But the sound. Oh, the sound. That 2-stroke triple scream was like nothing else on earth. It would set off car alarms that hadn't been invented yet. Dogs would howl, children would cry. Everyone knew when a Mach 3 was coming. The styling was pure aggression. That candy green paint that Kawasaki still uses today, the triple pipes sweeping along the side, the angular tank, the ducktail seat. It looked fast, dangerous, and slightly unhinged, perfect match for the performance. A modern H1 would need serious electronic intervention to be even remotely safe. But imagine it, a 500cc two-stroke triple with modern direct injection, traction control, wheelie control, and stability management, all of which you could turn off if you were feeling brave. Or stupid. The world needs dangerous motorcycles. Not everyone wants to be coddled by electronics. Sometimes you want a bike that reminds you you're alive. The H1 did that better than anything else in the 60s. Number 8. The BSA Rocket III. The BSA Rocket III was Britain's moonshot, their last attempt at building a world-beating superbike. It was brilliant, flawed, and ultimately doomed. But for a brief moment in 1969, it was one of the fastest, most advanced motorcycles in the world. The Rocket III had a 740cc triple that produced 58 horsepower. Same engine as the Triumph Trident, because BSA owned Triumph by then. But the BSA version was different, more radical, more aggressive. This was BSA's final statement, and they weren't holding anything back. Performance was serious, 120 miles per hour, top speed, quarter mile in the 12-second range. This thing could run with anything on the road in 1969. The triple-cylinder engine was smooth, powerful, and relatively refined. It was everything British twins weren't. The styling was love it or hate it. That ray gun silencer that looked like something from a science fiction movie. The angular tank, the strange seat shape. It didn't look like any other British bike, it looked like the future, which ironically, BSA wouldn't be part of. The frame was radical too. Instead of the traditional Triumph design, BSA used an inclined engine with different frame geometry. It handled differently. Some said better, some said worse. But everyone agreed it was different. BSA was trying new things, experimenting, pushing boundaries. The sound was incredible. That triple-cylinder howl was completely different from anything else. It wasn't the lumpy beat of a twin or the smooth whine of a 4. It was angry, urgent, mechanical. It sounded like it meant business. Production was limited and quality was variable. BSA was in financial trouble by 1969. They knew the end was coming. Some Rocket 3s were beautifully built. Others were thrown together by workers who knew they'd be unemployed soon. Finding a good one today is challenging. A modern Rocket 3 exists, kind of. Triumph makes a Rocket 3 with a massive 2300cc triple. But that's a cruiser. What we need is a proper sport triple that channels the original BSA. 700 to 900cc aggressive styling, that distinctive triple sound. Something that captures the spirit of British motorcycling's last stand. Number 7. The Triumph Bonneville. T120, the Triumph Bonneville. T120. The most famous British motorcycle ever made, the bike that defined what a motorcycle should look like for an entire generation. When people think of 60s motorcycles, this is what they picture, and for good reason. It was brilliant. The T120 had a 649cc parallel twin that produced 46 horsepower in street trim. But Bonneville engines were winning races and setting speed records all over the world. In 1962, a modified Bonneville went 224 miles per hour at the Bonneville Salt Flats, hence the name. Top speed for a street T120 was around 110 miles per hour, which was properly fast for the mid-60s, but speed wasn't really the point. The Bonneville was about style, character, and that perfect British twin sound. It was the motorcycle equivalent of a Jaguar E-Type, beautiful, fast, and slightly unreliable. The engine was a masterpiece of 1960s engineering. The parallel twin configuration was perfectly balanced. The power delivery was smooth and predictable. It had enough torque to pull from low revs, but could still rev to 7,000 RPM. It was the perfect all-rounder engine. The handling was excellent by 60s standards. The frame was strong and rigid. The suspension was well damped. The brakes actually worked most of the time. You could ride a Bonneville fast on twisty roads and feel confident. Well, as confident as you could feel on a 60s motorcycle. The styling was timeless. That beautiful tank shape with the knee indents, the chrome mudguards, the pea-shooter silencers, the simple, elegant lines. It looked right from every angle. It still looks right today. That's the mark of truly great design. The Bonneville influenced everything that came after. Every manufacturer tried to build their own version. The Japanese copied it, the Italians interpreted it, the Americans imported it. But none of them quite captured the magic of the original. Modern Bonnevilles exist and they're excellent motorcycles, but they're not the same. They're too refined, too perfect. The original T120 had character flaws that made it interesting. It leaked oil, it vibrated, it needed constant attention. But when it was running right, it was magic. That's what modern motorcycles are missing: character, imperfection, soul. Number 6. The Suzuki T20 Super Six. The Suzuki T20 Super Six was the bike that proved small displacement didn't mean slow. This little two-stroke twin could embarrass bikes 3 times its size. When it arrived in 1965, it completely changed what people expected from a 250. The T20 had a 247cc two-stroke twin that produced 29 horsepower. That was nearly 30 horsepower from a 250 in 1965. Incredible. This thing could hit 90 miles per hour, which was faster than most British 500 singles. It weighed nothing, handled like a dream, and sounded like a Grand Prix bike. The engine was incredibly advanced. It had automatic oil injection, so you didn't have to pre-mix your fuel. Revolutionary. The 6-speed transmission was the first on any production motorcycle. 6 speeds in 1965. The cylinder porting was derived from Suzuki's racing program. This was basically a race bike with lights. The power delivery was typical 2-stroke. Nothing much happened below 4,000 RPM, then the power came on like someone flipped a switch. The engine would scream to 8,000 RPM, making a sound that was half motorcycle, half chainsaw. It was intoxicating. The handling was exceptional. The T20 weighed just over 300 pounds. You could flick it through corners like a bicycle. The brakes were adequate for the performance. The suspension was well damped for such a light bike. This was a proper sports motorcycle in miniature. The styling was purposeful and aggressive. Twin pipes swept high along the sides. The tank was slim and racy. The seat was thin and uncomfortable, but who cared? This wasn't about comfort, this was about going fast and having fun. The T20 started a revolution. Suddenly everyone wanted a small, fast 2-stroke. Yamaha responded with their RD series. Kawasaki built their triples. But Suzuki was first. They showed the world that small bikes could be exciting. A modern T20 would be perfect for today's world. Imagine a 250 twin, either a high-revving 4-stroke or a clean 2-stroke with direct injection. Make it weigh under 300 pounds. Give it modern suspension and brakes. Keep it simple, light, and fun. That's what motorcycling needs more of. Not every bike needs to have 200 horsepower and weigh 600 pounds. Number 5. The Velocette Venom. The Velocette Venom. Here's a bike that most people have never heard of, but those who know. This was Britain's ultimate single-cylinder sport bike. A 500cc thumper that could run with bikes twice its size. And it did it with engineering that was decades ahead of its time. The Venom had a 499cc single that produced 36 horsepower. Doesn't sound impressive until you realize this thing could maintain 100 miles per hour for 24 hours straight. In 1961, a Venom set a 24-hour average speed record of 100.05 miles per hour on a 500 single. Think about that. The engine was a masterpiece, square bore and stroke for perfect balance, massive flywheels for smooth power delivery, the finest materials and tightest tolerances in the business. This wasn't mass production. Every Venom engine was hand-assembled by craftsmen who'd been building motorcycles for decades. The valve gear was revolutionary. Velocette used their own design with incredibly stiff push rods and perfect geometry. The result was an engine that could rev higher than any other big single without valve float. 7,000 RPM from a 500 single in the 60s was unheard of. The handling was telepathic. Velocettes had their own design philosophy about frame geometry, and it worked. The Venom could carve corners like a much smaller bike. It was stable at speed but flickable in the turns. The brakes were excellent by 60s standards. This was a proper sports motorcycle. The build quality was exceptional. Velocette was a small company that couldn't afford to make mistakes. Every bike had to be perfect. The paint was deep and lustrous. The chrome was thick and brilliant. The engine cases were polished like jewelry. These weren't just motorcycles. They were mechanical art. But Velocette was too small, too perfectionist to survive. They couldn't compete with mass production. The Venom died in 1970 when the company closed. Only about 5,000 were made in total. Finding one today is like finding buried treasure. A modern Venom would be incredible. A high-quality hand-built 500 single with modern fuel injection and materials but keeping that classic British character. There's nothing like a big single. The torque, the sound, the mechanical simplicity. KTM and Husqvarna make modern singles, but they're dirt bikes. The world needs a proper road-going big single. The Venom proved it could work. Number 4. The Norton 650 SS. The Norton 650 SS. The Street Racer. The Café Racer's Café Racer. This was Norton's hot rod, their Boy Racer special. When it came out in 1962, it was one of the fastest production motorcycles you could buy, and it looked the part. The 650 SS had a 646cc parallel twin that produced 49 horsepower in street trim. But everyone knew the first thing you did was throw away the street silencers and fit racing pipes. Then you had 55 horsepower and a top speed approaching 120 miles per hour. In 1962, that was seriously fast. The engine was basically a racing motor with lights, high compression pistons, wild cam timing, massive carburetors. This thing was barely civilized. It would spit back through the carbs if you closed the throttle too quickly. It would foul plugs if you didn't ride it hard. This was not a commuter bike. The handling was exceptional. Norton's featherbed frame was the best in the business. The 650 SS could corner at speeds that would have other bikes tied in knots. Racing success proved it. 650 SS base bikes were winning races all over the world. This was a proper competition machine. The styling was pure cafe racer. Low bars, rear set foot pegs, a tiny racing seat, and that distinctive Norton racing tank. The whole bike was silver and black, the Norton racing colors. It looked fast standing still. It looked like it belonged on a racetrack, not the street. The sound was incredible. With racing pipes, the 650 SS made a noise that could wake the dead. That distinctive Norton twin sound, but angrier, more urgent. It crackled and popped on the overrun. It bellowed under acceleration. Everyone knew when a 650 SS was coming. This was the bike that defined the cafe racer movement. Young guys would buy them, strip off everything unnecessary, and race from cafe to cafe. The 650 SS was already halfway there from the factory. It was built for speed, not comfort. A modern 650 SS would tap into the huge cafe racer market, but it needs to be authentic. Not some retro pastiche, but a proper sport bike with classic styling. Light, fast, raw, and slightly uncomfortable. The motorcycle equivalent of a Lotus 7. Norton is back, kind of, with modern bikes. But they need to build something that captures the spirit of the 650 SS. The world is full of boring, sensible motorcycles. We need more that are neither. Number 3, the BMW R69S. Bronze medal position goes to the BMW R69S. This was Germany's answer to British twins, and in typical German fashion, they over-engineered it to perfection. The R69S wasn't just fast, it was fast forever. You could ride this thing flat out until the fuel ran out, and it would ask for more. The R69S had a 594cc boxer twin that produced 42 horsepower. Top speed was right around 110 miles per hour, which was impressive for a shaft drive touring bike. But speed wasn't the point. This was about quality, refinement, and the ability to maintain that speed all day long. The engine was a masterpiece of 1960s engineering. The boxer configuration meant perfect primary balance. The shaft drive meant no chain maintenance. The build quality was exceptional. Everything was overbuilt. This wasn't just designed to last. It was designed to outlive you. The handling was different from British or Japanese bikes. That low center of gravity from the boxer engine made it incredibly stable. The shaft drive added some quirks, but once you learned them, the R69S was a wonderful bike to ride fast. It carved long sweepers like it was on rails. The comfort was exceptional by 60s standards. The seat was designed for all-day riding. The riding position was relaxed but sporty. The suspension actually worked. You could ride this thing from Munich to Milan without crippling yourself. Try that on a Norton. The build quality was in another league, the paint was perfect, the chrome was thick, the engine cases were beautifully finished, everything fit together like a Swiss watch. This wasn't just transportation, this was a statement about German engineering excellence, but it was expensive. Really expensive. A R69S cost nearly twice what a Triumph Bonneville did. You had to really want that German quality to pay that premium. Most people didn't. BMW sold them to doctors, lawyers, and engineers who appreciated the refinement. A modern R69S already exists, kind of. BMW's R9T captures some of the spirit, but imagine something more authentic. A simple, high-quality boxer twin without all the modern electronics. Just exceptional engineering and build quality. There's definitely a market for that. BMW proved with the R69S that not everyone wants the fastest or the flashiest. Some people want the best. Number 2, the Honda CB750. The silver medal, the Honda CB750, the bike that changed everything. When this thing arrived in 1969, it didn't just raise the bar, it launched the bar into orbit. The British motorcycle industry took one look at the CB750 and knew they were finished. This was the future, and they weren't part of it. The CB750 had a 736cc inline 4 that produced 67 horsepower. 67 horsepower in 1969. That was more than most British twins could manage with racing modifications. And this was stock with a warranty from a dealer. The top speed was 125 miles per hour, making it the fastest production motorcycle in the world. The engine was revolutionary. 4 cylinders, overhead cam, 5-speed transmission, electric start, disc brake. Technologies that wouldn't become common for another decade were all there in 1969. Honda didn't just build a faster motorcycle, they built a motorcycle from the future. The smoothness was unbelievable. British twins vibrated, 2 strokes buzzed, the CB750 just hummed. You could cruise at 100 miles per hour and hold a conversation. The engine was so smooth you could balance a coin on the tank at idle. Revolutionary. The reliability was game-changing. This thing didn't leak oil. It started every time. It didn't need constant adjustment. You could ride it every day for years, and it would just keep going. British bike owners couldn't believe it. A motorcycle that actually worked? What sorcery was this? The handling wasn't perfect. The CB750 was heavy, and the frame was a bit flexible for the power. But it was good enough. And the brakes, especially that front disc, were better than anything else available. This was a complete package, not just a powerful engine. The styling was controversial at the time. Some thought it looked bland compared to British bikes, but that was the point. Honda wasn't trying to make a beautiful motorcycle. They were trying to make a better motorcycle. Function over form. And the function was incredible. The CB750 deserves a comeback because it represents a pivotal moment in motorcycle history. This was when everything changed. A modern tribute with that same inline 4 character, but with modern technology, that would be something special. Honda makes retro bikes now, but they're all twins. The world needs a retro inline 4. The CB750 proved that configuration worked. Number 1, the Honda CB77 Super Hawk. And the winner is unexpected, the Honda CB77 Super Hawk. Not the most powerful, not the fastest, but the most important high-performance motorcycle of the 1960s. This is the bike that started the Japanese invasion. Without the CB77, there would be no CB750, no Kawasaki Z1, no modern motorcycle industry as we know it. The CB77 had a 305cc parallel twin that produced 28 horsepower. It could hit 104 miles per hour, which was astonishing for a 300 in 1961. This thing could outrun British 500s. It was Honda's first real sport bike, and they got it right first time. The engine was revolutionary for a small bike. Overhead cam, wet sump lubrication, 180-degree crankshaft for perfect primary balance. The engineering was years ahead of anything from Europe. This wasn't just a motorcycle engine. This was precision machinery. The reliability was unprecedented. The CB77 didn't leak oil. The electrics worked in the rain. The engine didn't need constant adjustment. You could ride it hard every day and it would just keep going. British manufacturers couldn't understand it. How could a motorcycle be this reliable? The handling was excellent. The CB77 weighed just over 350 pounds but felt even lighter. The tubular frame was rigid and well designed. The suspension was properly damped. This thing could corner with anything from Europe. The styling was gorgeous. That distinctive Honda tank with the rubber knee pads, the elegant lines, the beautiful paint and chrome. It looked expensive, exotic, special. This wasn't just another motorcycle, this was a glimpse of the future. The CB77 proved that Japan could build world-class motorcycles. Not just reliable commuters, but genuine high-performance machines. Every Japanese sport bike that followed owes something to the CB77. It showed the way. It proved what was possible. Sales were modest, especially in America where bigger was always considered better. But everyone who rode one was converted. Journalists raved about it. Racers won on it. The motorcycle world slowly realized that Japan was serious. A modern CB77 would be perfect. A small displacement twin with cutting-edge technology, light, fast, beautiful, and reliable. Honda makes the CB300R, but imagine something more special. Something that captures the spirit of innovation that made the original CB77 so important. The world needs motorcycles that push boundaries, that try new things, that show what's possible. That's what the CB77 was in 1961. That's why it's number 1. So there you have it, 25 of the fastest motorcycles from the 1960s that absolutely deserve a comeback. Which one surprised you the most? Did we miss your favorite 60s speed machine? Let us know in the comments below. And hey, if you enjoyed this ride through motorcycle history, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We've got plenty more vintage motorcycle content coming your way. Until next time, keep the shiny side up and the rubber side down. Thanks for watching.